Do you sometimes struggle to play strongest board? Are you often almost dead before wolves?
I'm dying.
Well, don't worry, because in today's video I'm going to be showing you a crucial skill when it comes to evaluating board strength, and it's going to bring your gameplay from this up to this. The concept that I'm going to be introducing to you today is called conditional units. So conditional units are only really strong when all of the conditions that enable them to be strong are met. Now, this concept is very commonly understood by high-level challenger players, but it's something that's not really talked about, and so that's why I wanted to address it in today's video. Generally speaking, conditional units have a higher cap, but they require things such as itemization, synergies, and much more to enable them to actually perform at the rate of some of the other champions. So when you're building your strongest board, you need to be constantly thinking about which units am I playing and which ones are more or less conditional than the others. Okay, great, so there's conditional units, but what actually makes a unit conditional? So we'll start off with some of the melee carries. On average, melee carries are going to be more conditional than the ranged ones. The reason is because if they're melee, they usually need healing, otherwise they're just going to die. A lot of the times they need a defensive option such as QSS and Edge of Night, otherwise they're just going to take aggro and die, and a lot of the times they need their traits active as well. This is kind of the opposite of League of Legends, so I understand if you're coming to TFT from League, it can be a little bit difficult to grasp, because in League of Legends, if you have a melee bruiser top laner, all they really need is one item, whereas the ADC needs their 3-item power spike, a support, they also need a tank to peel for them, an emotional support group for when it all goes wrong inevitably and they die anyway, and it's everyone else's fault except for theirs. I used to be an ADC main, by the way. Anyway, moving back to TFT, some other things to consider is if they have CC in their kit. For example, if you consider the difference between Nami and TF, obviously TF is a higher cost unit, he does a lot more damage, he's better. However, if you don't have any items for your TF, a lot of the times the Nami can just do more in general just because she has that CC. And that's the same for a lot of other units. So if you have two units who are like the same cost, but one of them offers CC and the other one doesn't, if you're not itemizing them, then often the CC unit will just be better and they'll be less conditional and you're more likely to want to play them. Another thing to consider is the mana pool. So if they have a really high mana pool, such as Karthus, a lot of the times in the early to mid game, if you get this unit early and you don't itemize them, they're not going to cast anyway. So the more mana pool, then usually the more conditional the unit. And of course, there are 100 other different reasons that can make a unit more or less conditional. And I challenge you to think of some that I didn't mention already, because if you're actively thinking about the different things that can make your units conditional, you're more likely to remember it and actually apply it to your own games versus me just telling you and you trying to remember everything. Okay, so now I'm going to go over a couple of examples just to give you my thought process when it comes to dissecting champions and what makes them conditional. Okay, so here is a rough chart of what I think are the conditional units to set. That's not to say that the higher or lower, the better or worse they are. It just means that the lower on this chart they are, the more you need to actually be itemizing them and paying attention to their synergies. Because if you're not and you're neglecting that, then throwing them on your board isn't going to do much. Okay, we'll start off with a really easy one. So Alawi. Alawi has so much effective HP, which means that this unit is a very unconditional unit. You can throw Alawi onto basically any single board and it's still going to give you a little bit more frontline because you're obviously getting those 2 extra tentacles. Of course, ideally, if you get an Alawi 2-star, you're itemizing her, but you really just don't need to do anything with this unit. This unit is just so powerful that you can just throw her on any board and it's going to be providing value. So for that reason, Alawi is the standalone unit who is the lowest conditional. Now let's go to the middle. So a unit that fits well in the middle would be a tank unit that's obviously going to be providing a little bit to your board, but it's generally speaking a little bit worse than the others. So we'll go with Garen. So Garen, I think, is smack bang in the middle. This is because there's a lot of other tanks that just do his job but better, but he's not the worst tank in the game, right? Like, he still activates Sentinel, he still activates 8-bit, he has a little bit of tanky stats when it comes to his ability, and so if you have him as your frontline, you can itemize him, sure, he's fine, but if you compare him to some of the other tanks that are a little bit less conditional, they're going to be doing a lot more for your board. So if you're having to choose a unit to throw in and it's not activating any synergies, there's a lot of other tanks that you'd choose over Garen. And finally, we'll go to the very bottom of the list. So a absolute 10 out of 10 conditional unit is going to be Karthus. I already mentioned briefly before how if you have a really high mana pool, you're going to need to itemize this unit. So Karthus without any mana items isn't going to be casting. Karthus without any raw AP isn't going to be doing any damage. And if you don't activate Pentakill, then that's even less damage that the Karthus is going to be doing. So a lot of the times when you're playing around Executioner Akali, if you don't have any items for your Karthus, a lot of the times you'll just play a Vex instead because she's going to be doing Karthus' job but better. So this is why Karthus is a 10 out of 10 conditional unit. And that is the end of this video. Remember that the whole point of this video was to get you thinking about how you should be playing your strongest board at each stage, and thinking about which conditional units are going to actually make my board better because I'm itemizing them, and which unconditional units should I be playing because they're just doing their job anyway, right? Like, they don't need to be itemized, they don't need to have all of their traits active to actually contribute something to your board. The tier list that I made was very, very rough. It'll change from patch to patch. In fact, when I first scripted this video, I actually had the tier list quite different, but then the patch changed, and you get the idea. So don't take it for gospel. The only ones that I think will stay there forever are going to be some of the extremes like Karthus and Alawi. But if you have any questions, then feel free to join me on my Twitch stream, and I can answer and maybe update you about some of the conditional units, as I think it's a really underappreciated aspect of TFT, and I think that is something that people should be thinking about more as well as talking about more. That's it for me for today, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.